Cool. Okay. I guess we could get the party started. So, cool. So we'll start with intros and then we'll get into it
Cool.
as per usual. Cool. Chibipo, we'll start with you. Is that how you pronounce your name?
That is correct. Yes.
Yes.
Oh, first try. Dang.
Yeah. I'm just a longtime fan of this series and her works. I read the first book, or my first book in the series. I read like in '94, '95.
Wow.
So and have been following it since, and I've been really excited seeing all the people that have gotten interest into it in the past couple of years. So
Jumping on. Yeah.
it's long overdue.
Yeah.
Nice. And Chris?
I will do my
sorry.
best not to spoil anything. I have notes, but I've written down, and I'm trying to be like, all right, I gotta make sure I don't spoil anything because I've read all the way up to not the final book. I didn't get the privilege for that, but up to what's published anyway.
Nice.
Well,
Glad you could join us.
I'm fully expecting you to tell me something that I've read in here that I haven't picked up already. So the idea that there might be a spoiler might be a total thing. But yeah, my name's Chris Mohan. Sometimes YouTuber, sometimes commentator, and appear on Steve's streams. And like beyond excited to talk about this.
Nice. And Varsha?
Hi, I'm Varsha, and I also am sometimes YouTuber. I just copy other people's introductions. That's what I do. This is my second attempt at reading the series. The first time I didn't have enough time to read this on a regular enough basis to appreciate it all that much. I didn't dislike it. I just didn't have the time that I should dedicate to it. So I'm really excited to have a discussion group for this now.
Yeah. So glad you all can join us. So for those who don't know, we are reading about 100 to 150 pages per week, and then we're meeting almost weekly to discuss that section. So we're trying to limit it to a manageable amount, and then that'll lead us right into the discussion with Janny, which we'll have April 8th or 9th, I forget. But so we'll probably, hopefully this format will work. We'll tweak it if we have to, but make it manageable for everyone. Don't want to be too much for everyone to keep up with. So this week we're doing chapters 1 through 5, which is about 150 pages, I think. Yeah. So
in this volume, it's about 170 pages.
177.
Yeah.
Really?
To be exact, yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I think the hardback is like 600 pages, and this one is nearly 800.
800, yeah. Something like that, yeah.
I think it's 135 pages for me, the first 5. Wow. Crazy.
It's a dense read.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a very dense read.
The Kindle version, it's about 176 too.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Wow, it's surprising because I read it on Kindle and I feel like I flew through it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I've reread lots of sections in this, and I'm not usually a reread sections kind of person.
Did you feel... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just felt like, you'd read a page, and I knew by the time I was that far in the book that I will have missed something. I've kind of glossed over this page, and in Janny's writing, there's something happening on every page, and so I should read over, and 9 times out of 10, absolutely have missed something, for sure.
Yeah, it does force you to read slowly, I think, like really absorb and take it in. Did you find the need to use the glossary a lot?
I try not to.
Yeah, I try not to as well. Because, and that's one of the things, again, that I found. There was lots of occasions I thought, oh my God, I don't understand what's going on here at all. But actually, especially in the way that it's structured, would they have like these little inserts of like events at the end of sections. But the book does a very good job of actually addressing it quite soon after that again, so you're not left too far lost or anything. So
yeah. I found it really helpful to read a chunk at a time, like a chapter a day. When I was reading it last time, I was reading a chapter a week or something like that, and I'd forgotten for motivations for why some characters were behaving a certain way. But now, like, it all made sense. I was like, oh, that's why that's happening.
Yeah, I tried to do about a chapter a day. Tried to break it up. It was it's very dense, but I felt like when I could focus on it and really engage with it, it was, and I don't want to say an easy read, but
Mhm.
it flowed really well.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there was a lot to it, but it flowed.
Mhm.
Like with someone like Erickson, sometimes I felt like I couldn't get into like a rhythm with it.
Mm.
Yeah.
So this was a lot different for me, but that's just my experience. So, but
Yeah.
Agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and there's like there are many sentences that felt like they had a lot of meaning, like gave you a lot of information about a character. So if you
Mhm.
miss that, then maybe you don't understand later on why something a character does make sense. So that was really cool, just how much meaning was imbued into some sentences. I guess we'll talk about some individual sentences, but yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, with close to 30 years reading these, I find new stuff every reread. So, even like AP Canavan did his
Mhm.
breakdown of the prologue, and I got to thinking about that, and I'm like, oh, things I hadn't even thought about in it, and I'm like, oh, well, so it's yeah, there are a lot of depth and layers. So
Yeah, I definitely felt actually what would be really handy for myself is to nearly have like a character sheet as I'm working my way through. As we get a bit about each character, the initial setup, who they are, etc. But actually just get a reminder of not only who the characters are, but kind of their development and how they change and becoming, whether we could have seen that or anything. I definitely feel like that's something that would really help this read.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
To keep track of, especially because of the prologue, right? Because of what it says about what people think of the events now and
Mhm.
what may have happened. Yeah, I kept looking for clues because of that prologue. I kept looking for clues about, oh, is this what's happening? Is it Lysaid turning bad, or Arathon, is he really evil at this point, or whatever?
Yeah.
The prologue's making us think. So, yeah, that sounds like a really fun way to track character development.
So the one thing I noticed out of the prologue this time, I was thinking about it the other day. Now, obviously, we know who these characters they're referring to, but I thought it was interesting that in the prologue, it refers to Arathon by his name, his first name,
That's right.
and then gives his title, but it doesn't do the same for Lysair.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's odd.
Mm-hmm.
Why would it do that? And they're just like, oh, he's divinity incarnate, and I'm like, okay, but that's almost kind of dehumanizing him to more like an idea or an ideal. And so it makes me wonder, it's like, so these temple archives that claim this, are they doing that on purpose? To like, who, they're like, yeah, we don't want to talk about the real person behind, this,
Yeah.
Figure because, of whatever reason. So I was really interested about that. I was like, wait. And, of course they do the, only we have the truth. And I'm like,
Mm.
But isn't that interesting? Because not to jump way to the end of the 5 chapters, when they talk about the two brothers, that they never mention their surname either. I mean, that's the point that's made like 5 chapters in, that this kind of removal of titles and names, and like obfuscating who people are, what way, or that would probably have some meaning to some people. Whereas I was reading that going, well, even if you told me their surname, that would mean nothing to me. But obviously, within this context, in this world,
yeah, within the
it would.
world, yeah, they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, we don't want to mention this to people
Yeah.
because people will recognize the name or something.
Mm.
Yeah.
And, yeah, especially I know we're jumping ahead a little, but yeah, to the minstrel Fellerin. That's one that it's like, yeah, he never mentions. They even draw it out. They're like, yeah, the sorcerers, like, definitely, it was like deliberately did not mention that name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I guess the heirs are well known, or like the king names, last names are probably well known and recognizable. Yeah.
And Layla's watching. Read the first 100 pages, but have a tight schedule today and might join next time.
Oh, yeah.
Hope you can join us next time, Layla. Paramita's summary of my thoughts. The prologue and initial setup were very compelling. Characterization and plot progression was on point. Critique: the writing didn't flow for me, didn't use the glossary.
I have a theory about this. I mean, it's quite an unusual prologue in that it's sort of an epilogue. insofar as, you know, when I read it the first time, a lot of prologues kind of often refer to events that happened 500 years in the past. Whereas in
Right.
this case, they present the prologue as already having happened, and then we jump back 500 years to the events that kind of the genesis of these characters and how they get there. And that threw me off because it kind of gave the appearance that all these events in this war have been going on for a very long time. And then the start of the book was very much, oh, we're at the end of this. So,
Yeah, they're like, this is like seventh age, you know,
yes.
and they talk about the third age. So it's like, yeah, this is like, I don't know the exact number of years, but it's like, yeah, this the impression is like these people, whoever's, you know, writing this prologue is like a really long time in the future.
Layla, I agree it flows really well and have a few questions, but overall I'm enjoying the story. And there's Robin. Ahoy, hoy. Sorry, got caught in traffic. Already good discussions. You're missed, Robin. I got confused with the names. 90% started with A. We just talked about that before we started recording about how a lot of them. Yeah, I'm really bad with the names, so I'm always confused with the names.
That's why comics and manga are good, right?
Yeah, you can see them. You can see the characters. Makes it a lot easier for knuckleheads like me. But the prologue, for it being like half a page, well, for me half a page, it's or like a couple of paragraphs. It sets up. It lets you know pretty quickly, like you're in for this epic, big story.
Yes,
It kind of prepares you for this large scale story.
Yeah. The other thing that drives me about it is that it kind of seeds that history is told by the victor of a war, and while not necessarily telling you what the outcome of the war is, it kind of does allude to that. So it kind of dangles that little thing at you to say, oh, you know, these events have happened and they happen a certain way, but actually interpretation of them is still open to discussion. Yeah.
And I guess the repercussions lasted all the way down to the seventh age, right? Because they're still worshipping the Lord of Light, and
Yeah, the religion and temples are like, you know, the Erethin is evil, the Lord of Light is good.
Yeah. I was wondering earlier when you were talking about that, Chibipo, about whether you know, it's a situation where, you know, the Lord of Light himself is evil or good, or if it's just a situation that got away from them and their followers are who are propagating whatever ideas they have about these two, I guess, enemies.
That is a very good speculation. And that's all I'm going to say. That, you know, if you get further in the series, you'll find out more about that. But you know, whether you're right or wrong, but you know, that is some very insightful, you know, thoughts there.
I think it's interesting that they also, you know, the idea that this is wars of light and shadow. Light is supposedly seen as good by definition, and shadow is seen as evil by definition. You know, in terms of storytelling or even scary stories and people's perception, you know, of light and shadow, etc. So again, the idea that it would already play with that, and the first prologue is kind of an interesting context in which to set the story.
Yeah.
Janny mentioned once, you know, you may have seen the interview or comments somewhere that, you know, she did that intentionally. And I know nowadays people are like, oh yeah, the person who's dark and sinister, you know, it's like a, you know, almost a trope that everybody's like, that happens all the time, but it really wasn't at the time she started this, you know, that common a thing where it's like, you know, the blonde-haired, fair-haired guy is right and just, and, you know, moral, and the dark-haired one is all evil, and, you know, but she's like, yeah, I don't really like that, you know, idea.
People are rarely just one thing.
Yeah.
Which again, I think is a theme that comes out as we make our way even through the first 5 chapters, that people are multi-layered. What they present, maybe not everything that we see.
To that point, Layla comments, the prologue gave me the impression that Erithon was evil. I'm probably going to mispronounce it. But now 100 pages in, I'm starting to see there is more to his character. That's another thing it plays with, too. It also seemed to me that Lysair and Erithon both had opportunities to harm the other, yet held themselves back. Am I reading that correctly? Especially Lysair. Erithon's decision not to kill him is more obvious.
Yeah.
And it took me a minute to catch on that they were related.
Mm.
Yes,
I think, yeah, I
they
guess.
are. I can, cover that if you'd like. I know it's covered, I think, in chapter 1.
Yeah.
Mm.
As well. But yes, they are half brothers.
I think
Yeah.
it's an interesting part because I'm sure it came out in a single sentence, but it seemed to be doled out a little bit at a time, even up to the point that the apparition of the mother appears, and that seemed to add another little bit of, oh, right, that's what connects those two, etc. So it isn't like it's a line in the story where they say, oh, by the way, these two, it happens. They kind of talk about some of the interpersonal relationships, and we kind of infer that what happened,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is clever.
Mm-hmm.
How to make your reader feel smart. I always look for those kind of things. Right? Some writers do it incredibly well, of like giving the readers intelligence. By just trusting them to kind of put things together.
Yeah, I like that. Yes, I agree. So I think to Layla's point, I think Lyser and Arathon are basically, I think when we meet them, good people who just hate each other because of the feud or are trying to, and even when they meet, they are half brothers. They recognize that relationship, and Arathon probably just does not want to hurt him at all, and Lyser also, I think, when he meets him the first time, he goes in with good intentions until Arathon gives him visions that make him unhappy. So I think when we meet them, they both are fairly good to each other, or at least intend to be good to each other, and then situations keep getting away from them.
I find their backstories really interesting, especially by the time we got to about chapter 4, in that it sort of became like a class thing. Especially there's the line that Lysair says about, he's starting to get a bit of growth on his chin, and he's looking for his valet to come and look after him, and he's kind of a bit on edge, and it's kind of pointed out at that stage, and then comparison with Arathon, who's calloused hands from working and doing all that kind of stuff, and then the role that the mother has played in each of their different lives. One is seen as a role of shame, and the other one obviously played a much stronger hand. So actually the start of their characters and where they come from at the start is very, very different, and that I think a lot of their conflict comes from them initially seeing their differences in each other and kind of saying not only just the legacy conflict, but actually the differences in the background. And it's only when they start to investigate, like the calluses in the hand, that kind of stuff, that they kind of realize, oh, that's why you're like that, or that's why you were in that situation, or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess Arathon does a lot of provoking of Lysair, so Lysair's hatred feels very warranted at various points. But and Arathon does not actively dislike Lysair, at least that we notice. He's just not engaging or not getting involved in any way. Yeah.
Here's a question I have: who's older?
Lysair.
Lysair, because Arathon was
Yeah.
born after.
Yeah, so it came after, but Arathon seems like the more mature one.
Yeah.
Is the bit that I was going to, point I was going to
Yeah.
make, because obviously, I kind of thought when I was reading it, I must have this wrong with the sequence of the queen being banished, going around, because it would seem like Lysair is the older one, but the roles and the kind of seniority in the relationship seems to be kind of reversed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that ties mostly to, as it's mentioned, Arathon was trained, or basically lived most of his life at Raven with the archmages, so he's got a more broader view of things, taught to see.
He's he's got more lived experience, you know, in terms of Lycia, who seems to be being protected an awful lot, very much that spoiled,
Yeah, and
noble
it's like,
type.
and he,
Yeah.
yeah, and he goes from Raven, where you learn to see people's motivations and whatnot, to being the heir to a kingdom that's impoverished and its people are starving, and and so I guess we kind of moved past the prologue now. So that chapter 1, that bit, so it's like we open up and like everything's everything's on fire, and they're picking their way through the wreckage here, and we gather there's a blood feud, and they paint like the survivors, the Amaroth people are, paint their opponents as this terrible thing, but then you see they're like, oh yeah, but we had 17 ships and they had 1, and I'm like, okay, so why did 17 ships attack 1? This seems a little imbalanced.
Just really quickly, Layla commented, I was thinking the same thing. Arathon seems to be more experienced and mature. Lysair has been in a palace bubble. And just want to mention really quickly, because Janny was nice enough to leave us with some things to talk about. It's kind of relates to this, what we're talking about, but she mentions you may encounter characters or groups you don't like, depending, but until you know their moral high ground, and they may or may not tell you. So look at what they do that may not be said. So kind of playing around with that a little bit.
So this made me think there aren't that many groups that we have been introduced to. Certainly individuals. In fact, I thought it was strange that it wasn't until the Bard character that was the first kind of like fantasy tropey thing of them going along the journey and picking people up along the way. That was the first one that we got to at that stage. But everything that was kind of like tribal groups, or the groups of people that were treating them in some way. So you obviously had the king, so much to how he was treating Arathorn, and keeping him very drugged up and basically accepting that he was going to be insane. I think with the initial intent that they were just going to take him there and make a very public display of executing him until events kind of transpired.
Yeah, the king is very much in a I hate this this kid, and everything he represents, because he's the ruin of my marriage and whatnot.
I think for good reason. I think he has pretty decent justification for disliking this kid.
We've also met 2 members of the Fellowship of the Seven, I guess, and the Seeresses. I forget what their group is called. Coriani. Yeah. Are they sorceresses?
Enchantresses, yeah.
Oh, enchantress, right. And I guess we've met a few people from those.
Well, the people within the village, how they respond to the comment or the true tongue or whatever they said. Yeah.
And Robin comments, I love author prompts. And it felt like the king ruined his own marriage, though.
I think the king is kind of obsessed, and that's part of it's alluded to in the exchange with the memory and all, but and I mean it'll kind of come up later, but basically he did ruin his marriage before it ever began, really. It's just it didn't come out until later. He approached Raven about the betrothal and all that under false pretense. His entire intent was to get himself a couple of kids with superpowers so that he could exterminate Carthan. That clearly did not work out well for him.
It was I think later, maybe when Athandir is trying to heal Arathon, we see him notice that the powers that the kids have were given as dowry in the marriage, right?
Yes.
I thought that was interesting. Like, you can actually control the power that your child has, and maybe the mother chose to not give Lysair the power over shadow. Yeah, I had a point of confusion from the first chapter that's referenced later on. I think in the first chapter, we meet the uh, people from Amroth who are who've had several ships devastated by the Master of Shadows. But then later, Arathon's thinking to himself that he never meant to kill and he never used it for bad. So I'm trying to figure out what happened to those ships. Was he trying to do something else and they ended up drowning? Oh yeah, okay, I remember now. He turned the ships against each other, but I would argue that that's the same as actually,
Well,
doing
um,
damage.
I do know, uh, exactly what he did.
Mhm.
And it will sort of get covered later, but it's not really a spoiler. So, the stuff that's a spoiler I won't talk about. But what he ended up doing is used his shadow to basically craft illusions,
Mm,
um, to make it look like there were more ships than there were,
mm,
Right.
and the Amaroth fleet. And this is in part ties into the blood feud and how they hate each other. Were just so gung ho aggressive that they charged at them, and got mixed up all in the jumble of ships and started shooting each other.
mm. Got
Because
it.
they
Okay.
were just all confused about who was what, and
Yeah,
just got really aggressive and aggroed on them, and basically tore themselves apart.
that makes sense. Yeah, I guess that's less. Yeah, they could have been more careful there to not hurt each other. So I guess that makes sense.
He Batmaned it. He kept a spotless record by letting them do it to themselves.
Yeah, I think she draws on. She's mentioned this too. One of her inspirations for it was a documentary about the um, uh, a battle in England or Scotland or somewhere, the Culloden Moor,
Oh, yeah.
where they were fighting in a valley and they were all jumbled up together, and the British up on the hillside started firing their cannons into the people below without any regard for who was, whether they would hit their own people. And it's pretty graphic and disturbing. But yeah, they're just like, yeah, no, we want to break this up, so we're just going to start shooting.
Mm.
Parmitha had a question. I was very curious about Lysair and Arathon's mother, particularly what Arathon remembers of her. I
Yeah,
think
do we see any flashbacks to what Arathon remembers of her?
I don't think so. I don't remember anything.
Oh, I think she died giving birth to Arathon.
She doesn't, but she does die. When he's fairly young.
Mm.
She ran off, and went to Carthan and slept with his father, and which produced Aerith. She didn't initially intend it. She was intended just because she was angry. So it was I'm fathering this producing this child out of spite. But then she decided, but she did kind of fall for him. But
Mm.
ended up leaving and going back to her father and the Archmage, because she was afraid it was going to make things, the feud even worse. It's like, well, kind of, the horses have already ran out the door at that point.
Yeah.
And then she, took ill at some point after he was born, and then he was raised by his grandfather.
Another one of Jenny's points was the story opens as a splinter world, not the central world to the story, and I have no maps, so readers looking to find landmarks in the first chapter sets. No reference exists yet, I know, but hadn't had time to formally draw it up. I don't really reference the glossary maps too much myself, but I probably should.
Yeah. Glossary I refer a lot, but maps not that much. And when I try to look at the map in this one, it's barely legible, the places. That
Yeah, the best, if you want to look at a map, the best spot is on her website.
Hmm.
She's got a
Yeah.
one piece without the folded the page down the middle, and you
Nice.
can actually click on spots, and
Yeah.
see where
Hmm.
things happened. A fair warning, it should tell you, but there are spoilers. There can be spoilers depending on where you click. So
Yeah, it's really cool. I think there's a checkbox for if you want spoilers. So otherwise, it's just an interactive map that you can like expand. It's very cool.
Ah, that's cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've definitely changed a lot. When I was a younger fantasy reader, I used to eat maps up. Like, honestly, I would pour over the map before I even read a page, sort of kind of had an idea. And now I almost never look at a map. It doesn't make any.
Mhm. Yeah.
In fact, I would say a lot of fantasy writers don't even care. The distance traveled, time spent, etc., can sometimes only infuriate the reader rather than rather than help.
I think it
Yeah.
depends on the map. I like this map just because I can see places, and she's got ruins and things marked. I will say in one of the books, um, uh, if I'm reading it, I like to pull up the map because I like tracking where he's
Mm.
where he's going across the course of the book, because it's
Uh,
basically a rabbit being chased by wolves kind of scenario, and I'm just following along on the map as he where he goes. So
is that one of the light and shadow books or a different?
yes,
Oh,
yeah.
oh
Right.
cool.
And Robin
Yes.
Robin commented, "Map slanderer." And thank you for the heads up on that map. It will be helpful. Layla had a question. I have questions too. Mostly, she left Laysar after he witnessed a fight between her and the king. Did she realize she would set her kids against each other?
Yeah. And also, I think she felt a bit cold for me. For like just like she basically abandoned Lysa for uh her angry purpose, right? I don't suppose she could have come back to him reasonably because of the king and how angry she made him, I suppose. But also, yeah, I felt bad for Lysa for being abandoned by her.
Yeah, I think she's the most interesting character of the first 5 chapters, though,
Yeah.
because we've only been given her the facts from poor angles, if you know what I mean. People that only have bad
Yeah.
things to say about her, and obviously, given how much prophecy has been sitting here, all that, maybe all these things had to happen. That is always a possibility. We don't know enough about her to judge her.
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one of Janny's points was you have to think a little deeper with this work, which is not a big deal because what you miss will absolutely will come for you later. So expect the markers to move.
I read that comment and went, "Oh my god, I'm already
Yeah.
reading this so deeply already. What the heck?"
I know. That's what I thought too. And she had a discussion topic for us. Think about who is speaking and what they know. Who are they talking to or observing? And what do they know? And what is in between that is assumed that may not be what you, the reader, thinks you know. Until you know, you may not know.
So it, with Malazan, I go back to previous books and search for names when I can't remember something happened. I feel like this book so far has a pretty small cast of characters, and we need to remember events rather than people when we saw them before and so on. So it's going to be interesting how we keep track for the future.
It does stay across the series pretty concentrated as far as cast goes.
Mm.
So it's not like and I've read through book 8 of Balazan, and I could barely tell you who anyone is. That's as far as I made before. I was like, no, I'm done with this. I don't remember who these people are. They come and go without rhyme or reason. And half the time I didn't even know where I was. I was like, what is going on? How does this do, connect to anything? But the cast, it's like, while the events are huge in scale. It's both. It's like the story is both like this, massive events that affect, and have wide-ranging consequences. But it's at the same time, it's very personal
Mm.
and like concentrated. It's like you're not seeing like all these hundreds and hundreds of cast members. It's a very tightly knit as far as cast goes.
Yeah, that is interesting. I have to figure out how to search previous books to remember things.
Oh, yeah.
The bit I took away from that was, well, one is Robin's point is like, as soon as I read that, I was like, right, I need to reread it all again just and make new notes because I wasn't thinking about it from that point of view. But I think in general, it was very much the idea of, again, the Ted Lasso quote of be curious, not judgmental. And the whole way through the book, be curious about the characters, what they're saying, why they're saying it, all of that kind of stuff like Janny alludes to.
Yeah, and I think the prologue sets us up for that, right? Like even the people of this world have drawn conclusions which may not be correct. So, and this is our process of finding out who's right. So we shouldn't make judgments early on, I suppose.
As the prologue says, let each who reads determine the good and evil for themselves.
I like that. Yeah. Robin commented, I already feel like I need to reread the first 3 chapters to make sure I got it all. I'm feeling the same way.
I don't know that on a first read through that you would get everything.
Yeah.
I can safely say I haven't, and like I find new stuff even, like I said, close to 30 years now. But like I'll read a new book when a new book would come out. I'd read it and I'd be like, whoa, and then I'd go back and reread, and with the stuff I'd learned in the new book, it would, information you gain and whatnot, and you'd come back to things and you'd be like, oh, well, I completely missed that because I did not know X thing.
Yeah.
And so, I know people are like, oh, well, she's just retconning things. I'm like, no, it's all very, I think, meticulously plotted out. So it's like, you'll get an interpretation of something, but then you'll learn information in a later book and it'll completely change how you viewed, a scene. And that may happen more than once.
I think Johnny's prompts here tell you how carefully it was plotted out, how very carefully thought about it it was, as we go through, and it was like, okay, so just pay attention, just follow with what's going.
Yeah, to that point, one of her points was, I do endings. A lot of what you see in the first half is building to a convergency at halfway, and then things will take a sharp turn and then will hit with a hammer. Lots of fantasy books do this the other way around. So,
yeah, so that's pretty much, the prologue is the ending. That's kind of the point there, and then kind of doing reverse.
One thing I really like is that another one of hers, the style is set to be timeless, not hooked into modern use or slang. So the story would not date. It is building you into an experience, not just a read. An experience, again, you'll see, last guarantee. Love the book or hate it. If you finish the ending, you will never forget it. I really hate when books use slang, like especially fantasy. I'm out.
Yeah. I'm with you on that, Steve. I do not like it. I will put up with it if there are other interesting things. I won't dislike a book over it, but yeah, I very much appreciate a book a lot more if it has, I guess, a more immersive sort of prose that applies to the world.
Yeah, this feels very classic fantasy. If there was slang within it, it would be jarring. I can see certain books that could approach it from a more modern take and then make it fit. Certainly, an urban fantasy can get away with it an awful lot more than something like this. But the prose has to fit the world.
Yeah.
Does everybody love the writing?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
I can see it being very divisive. I definitely can.
Yes. I described it once somewhere that a lot of people, one complaint you'll see is they're like, why is this so wordy? that is, I wouldn't. Some people have called it purple, but I'm like, no. As far as the prose, but just a complaint is like she uses so many complicated words, and I don't understand it, and why does she use 5 words when 1 would do? And I'm like, it's not popcorn fantasy.
But also, I don't know that I disagree that I agree that 1 word would do. I feel like each of those 5 words means something. Like, I think the best examples I can think of are every time we have a deeper insight into Arathon's character. My favorite one is well, there are 2, and so sorry, I got a page shooting notification, but
Me too. I got one too.
when it's, I think, at the very beginning of their journey, there's something about the word grief. I'm pretty sure I highlighted it, but I want to show that. And then when Lyser shines light on Arathon and he's just thinking to himself, like, the words that are used there, I think they just add so much depth to Arathon's character, and it's just 1 sentence each time. So I don't necessarily agree that it's wordy prose, or that where there are lots of words used to describe something, that some of them are unnecessary. I think we're just maybe not reading what we should be into those words.
Yeah. The word I would use for the prose and the amount of words and use of words is that it's very additive. It gives you more, it gives you more description, gives you more feeling, gives you more timbre, of the world. It is not like, I think I had a brief discussion with you on Wednesday after our stream. It's not Jordan, where 3 pages have went past and he has described something that really didn't add anything to the book, just kind of was there as description and kind of being its own
You know
thing.
a lot about what they're wearing now.
Exactly right, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
description of the way they hold their hands and fold their arms, etc. All that kind of stuff. Whereas this isn't. This is very beautiful. I think, and as Varsha said, sometimes you reread the sentence just to get the extra something out of the setting, rather than kind of going, oh god, that didn't happen. No, I can reread and get something more out of it because of how well it's written.
Yeah, Jenny did mention most people get the hang of the prose by 4 or 5 chapters down the line. It may not be for everybody. That's okay. People with aphantasia, inability to visualize, may have more trouble than others. And Robin commented, it took me a minute to get into it, but once I was there, it was good. It took me longer than usual to read because it was way more wordy, but it fits. And Layla comments, I like the prose. I did not notice anything overly descriptive or wordy. Yeah, I didn't notice anything wordy at all. It did feel dense, but it felt like every word had weight to it. It didn't feel like it was just fluff.
I like calling it painting with words. Yes, because as we know, she's also an artist, and I feel like that's what she's doing here. It's like the paper is the canvas, and the words are her ink and paint, and it's all just to make an image encourage you to make an image in your mind of what you're reading.
Yeah. The use of alliteration, it's not even something I normally notice, but she uses alliteration all the time, and it really hits. It gives it like a beat, and the rhythm to the writing that isn't just description. It kind of gives it really. And most of the tabs that I have are alliterative, lovely alliterative examples that I have within it, and I'm like, oh my god, it's so good.
Did you bend your spine? Varsha and Chris, did you bend your spines yet?
This one's almost impossible not to, but
okay.
I'm doing my best. It's not so bad at the moment. It actually reads like, it looks like it's going to be difficult to read and hold, but it actually falls open quite easily. I find it, I'm surprised. I thought I was going to ruin this book within about 100 pages.
I think this one is actually pretty bendy, so I think we're going to be able to read it without breaking the spine.
Impressive.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm not giving it to the wife though. She has to get her own copy because she will utterly destroy it. I mean, this will be in tatters.
Robin, bend it. Bend it.
Oh my god, Robin, hi.
It's just wrong, Robin. It's wrong.
Oh, it hurts my fingers to not break mass market paperback spines, but this one is a strange size. It's not quite a mass market, right? It's a
Yeah.
little bit
They,
bigger.
when they reissued them, they're a little odd.
Mm.
My first copy of the mass market one, yeah, I bent its spine. I think that one's actually a better quality overall as far as keeping the bending, because the first one I read it so many times I destroyed it. Like the cover, you know, you know, wore off to where it wasn't attached anymore, and I had to tape it back in place, and it was wrinkled on
wow.
the end. It's like you could tell this had been read and read and read.
And do you have the
Actually, yeah.
hardcovers now, do you?
I do. I was talking about that with Steve. I have actually ended up with 2 sets of the hardcovers because I moved a few years back and my set was in storage, and then COVID happened and I wanted my copies back. And
Right.
I ended up hunting down copies because then I got my other copies back. So I have 2 sets now.
Nice.
Nice.
One less for me to find.
I have the one set, and I keep thinking I actually had a couple of copies of and I've given out copies to people, and I'm like, I'm just gonna take this other set and just give them away or something to people, because it's like I have the one set, I don't need 2, and I want other people, because they're so hard to find now.
Mm.
Probably due in part to me going I'm buying multiple copies, but still.
You're a fan. This is part of the fandom part of it. This is how much you love the book series. Well, let me tell you.
Yeah. Let me show my
Yeah, let
bookshelf.
me look at how many times I've bought these books. Either for myself or for when a paperback wears out, or to be like, I'm going to buy this for someone.
Yeah.
I just did that yesterday for a Kindle version. I was like, here, read this book.
Yeah, I say that about the Magician books. We've bought these 4 times, and that's the best quality one that we have left in the house. The rest of them are just utterly destroyed. Like it's just, yeah. I'm blaming my wife again.
Oh, I found the. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No,
No,
go
go ahead.
first.
Yeah. I found the Arathon quote, one of the 3 that I had highlighted because they were so revealing of his character, I guess, or at least what his feelings at the time. The first one is in immediately after, when Lysa meets him for the first time in the ship, and the line is, that brief instant his control slipped to reveal tearing grief and shocking desperation. So the words there, tearing grief and shocking desperation, that's just one sentence, and I know so much about what Arathon is feeling right there. Yeah, I think the words are very carefully chosen. And then there's another, and then my second favorite, I guess, is when Lyser flashes light on him and he's caught unawares, because he's very careful about what he expresses and what he shows to everyone around him. So the few moments we catch him unawares, I think those are really beautifully written for me.
I had highlighted that, especially that second passage, because it's the very last one that I've done. It comes to the end of the end of chapter 5, of when he does shine the light on him, and he can't control his reactions very much,
Right.
and because it's written quite unusually, I would say. It's a single sentence written within the prose. It does stand out even in the writing style to kind of say, "Oh, right, it catches your eye."
Yeah.
Make sure you don't miss it.
Yeah.
Here's a question that for some of us. It's a bit grimdarky in places.
Yeah, it's a little dark. Yeah,
It gets a bit, just in a couple of points. I mean, a couple of very classic fantasy, but the bit where they happen upon the retinue of people that have been butchered was pretty gnarly. For classic fantasy, certainly, anyway. And there was a couple of other bits that kind of struck me, especially in the drugging of Arathorn as well. How they treated him, the kind of devil may care of, like, consequences to him as a person doesn't really matter, etc. It was kind of a bit okay. I don't want to say stakes in the world necessarily, but there's a darkness. There's a darkness that pervades over it, other than just the shadow.
Yeah.
Itself.
Since you brought that up, I thought the sequence where Arathorn recovers from the addiction was so well done. The amount of detail in that, I think both the care that the healer gave to him, and far more importantly for me, just how resilient Arathorn is to the whole thing. I loved being in his head at the time, and as he fought with every grain of himself to get better. I really love this, and that's also, I think, we talked about this a little bit about Guts during our Berserk discussions, but like, he doesn't want to live, but he also doesn't want to quite die. Like, he doesn't want to lose himself, I think. So that, I thought that sequence was really well done. It was pretty impressive.
Really interesting sequence, I thought, to write as well, because it's quite prolonged at a stage when most fantasy books are trying to set up character and doing all that kind of stuff. You get somebody recovering from a drug addiction, it again, sort of grimdarky in its own little way, in the kind of the and the terrors and the horrors that he goes through, and about how it ties to memory, and especially how it links to the bit where he gets his memories rebuilt after the events of Mirth. And what seems to be probably the most pivotal part of these first 5 chapters is that process of getting his memories rebuilt and then extracted and controlled, especially when you consider be curious about people's motivations and who they are, because I would say that Asandir is his name, is the most kind of, he's the character we know least about, in a lot of ways. So it's very much, okay, what are you really doing? And what are your powers? What are your powers?
Oh, and Asandir's powers, I think we have Arathorn's perspective about them for, like, in the very beginning, and how he describes them. He seems like such a powerful person in those, like, I think there are like 4 or 5 mentions of just how powerful Arathorn is. So yeah, I think that was another thing that I hadn't paid a lot of attention to the first time I read, because I was reading them over such long gaps. But now I'm noticing how powerful Asandir is as well. And he's one of the fellowship. I assume the remaining 6 people are his peers as well, and are similarly powerful.
But he can't do anything about the Mistwraith at all.
He's
not that powerful. His power and extends so far.
I gotta be mum.
But I thought the section where they investigate actually Arathorn's, musical powers and art powers as being a thing that, well, people didn't expect him to be like that, just makes you sit and go, well, what about everybody else? If the powers can be multi-layered and multifaceted like that, why not everybody here? Why not even Lysair? In so far as his powers have not been explored at all, his father pretty much forbade it because of the events that happened there. He knows nothing about who he is, other than this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like he can throw light around, but some of it too ties to as we talked about their upbringing and how maturity, and whatnot. And Lysair is more kind of in the princely bubble, so it's like him, and he feels his role very keenly, so he's not as inclined to, I'm just going to go off and I'm a prince, I have responsibilities, I'm not just going to go off and be a bard or whatnot. I don't have the the leeway to just go and do that. And you can kind of see that, sort of hangs around him. He doesn't feel like he should be anything but a prince. He kind of looks down on, any other profession. He's like, oh, I could go be a mercenary, but that's honorless. And
for Arathorn, I think there was a bit that Asandir notices that the Sahila's foresight makes it so that he cannot. I think he really struggles with having to make difficult decisions, like whether to use his powers to hurt people or to lose his own people in the process. So yeah, I thought that was a really interesting discussion. So I feel like there might be room for interpreting Arathon's reluctance to lead or take on any responsibility as him not doing his duty, perhaps. But also, um, he, I think if he does take up whatever he's supposed to take up the responsibility, I feel like there might be room to do as much harm as the potential for good, or at least that's probably what he thinks because of what the decisions that he struggled with earlier on about whether to save his father or save his people in the process. So I think that'd be really interesting. I think Asandir is getting ready to force him into a role. So how he takes that on, and yeah, it's just already we feel like there's a lot of mental load on Arathon.
Yeah, it's like he, when he's going through the, breaks the curse, of Mirth, that's messing with his memories, and he looks and he, just like you can tell, he's just like automatically assessed everything that there is to know about, Arathon, and he's just like, the thing we need him to do, he's not going to do. He wants, I can already tell he wants nothing to do with it, and he, he sort of, you got the thoughts from Asandir, and he's like, I'm trying to think of a good way to word this. He talks about how they don't meddle, but he at the same time he kind of does. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna make sure he can't really remember that because I want to get him over here to this place so we can properly manage him.
Yeah.
So, because he talks about like it mentions the law of the major balance. And how you'll be the hope for prophecy, and Arathon clearly wants nothing to do with it, and he's already kind of like, yeah, I'm just kind of pushing the pieces on the board because you're going to do this whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
I think contrast that with how the Triton like again, typical fantasy norms would say that as soon as the guiding hand comes into play, whether that be Gandalf, Alanon, any of those classic ones out of fantasy, they'd be looking to build Lysair's powers, from the very, like his apprenticeship of some sort, but they not interested in that at all at this stage. They're very much just traveling from A to B and kind of moving along, and there's been no pushing and building of his powers except Lysair kind of occasionally having little flashes or something like that happen to do.
Yeah, not even as part of the journey, right? Like let's use the hours while we're resting to train you. It's nope, we're just getting from place A to place B.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I thought the memory thing was pretty interesting. It wasn't a wiping out of his memories. Like he still had access to the memories and most of the feelings. There were just like some connections that he lost. So I thought that was really well done, and also I guess points to some of the subtlety of Asandir's powers, because for how powerful we keep hearing he is, and he's able to do such a pinpointed modification of his memories or like connections. I think that's really cool.
They walk with a very light step. Let's just put it that way.
Interesting.
It just kind of happened by chance, but I think the end of chapter 5 was a great place to pause.
Yeah.
It just happened to work out that way. But
I thought you had inside knowledge. It ended kind of like a little wrapper in a bow in some way. The book is very like that section about the memories, etc. is very like Tagana. If anybody's read it by Guy Gavriel Kay, there's a lot of very similar kind of ideas running through that book as that run through this. So if you like that aspect of it, I would suggest go read Tagana, which is another big book.
Yeah, I gotta get to it. It's on my list for this year. sorry, not sorry.
Sorry, exactly.
Yeah. There's another line. Sorry, did anyone else?
No,
I feel
no,
like
go
I'm
ahead.
hogging the
No,
conversation.
go for it.
I like hearing the lines.
There's another line that I really loved. This the beginning of chapter 3, Exile, the opening here. Whatever, who drinks this water shall cease to age 500 years, yet suffer lengthened youth with tears through grief, death's daughter. I loved that. It's so beautiful. It's sad. I think I like sad things.
Yeah, there's such beauty in the writing.
Mhm.
One of my absolute favorite things structurally, though, is whether you think it's the end of one chapter or the start of the other one, it's like 3 things to think about. Oh wow, what's that like?
Yeah.
Like here, 3 events that happen, some about characters and people we haven't met or discussed yet, but just as this was happening, this was
Yeah.
happening, this was happening, this was happening. And it's like, oh man. It almost like a little reward for getting to the end of a chapter, or to kind of little thinking points. Here's something to think about going forward. Structurally
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No,
No,
go
no,
ahead. I was gonna say, if I remember correctly, she said she borrowed, that concept or idea from, I think, Zelazny.
All right, okay.
That some book he'd written where he had something like that. I think it was Zelazny. I'm not 100% sure on that, but and that it was just a thing she really liked. So
Yeah, I also really like that because I mean, it takes me a while when I'm reading multiple perspectives or whatever to switch to a completely different location. I'm like, I have to put the book down, prepare myself for that change, and come back. So I like that we get little snippets of it. So it's not a complete shift. Like, you've heard about this before, so here's going into it in a bit more detail. So yeah, I really appreciated that aspect of it. It's a bit of a silly reason, but yeah, I liked it for that too, and for the reasons you said, Chris.
yeah, some of them it's like, well, this may come up in the next chapter, or it may come up several chapters down the road, or it may sort of just be, not really come up. It's just someone's, feelings. Like at the end of, I think, the first chapter, the healer is drinking himself senseless because he is not really happy about what he's doing. By drugging Aerith.
But Janny's clever because she does that rather than them just being thrown away things that you just think of. At least a couple of them in the first couple of chapters pay off very quickly. They get investigated, so it encourages you to invest in them. And read and kind of say, oh, maybe this will give me an idea of what's coming up in the next chapter or so.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Robin said, I think I got confused because I read past 135 because section 5 was later. A lot of sub-chapters within sections. I agree, Chris. It's almost like a little bonus, like a little extra, and it's not too long, so it's just long enough to kind of add more to the story, to the world, and it's not like overwhelming. It's like a little tidbit.
And even with like the chapter itself is split into like 3 separate parts. The first section and then the other 2, and those sections, they may not, you may get a section that goes by really quickly. Like, is it the end of chapter 4 or in a part of chapter 4 maybe, or maybe chapter 3, where we meet the second sorcerer. Well, we'd already met him, but and he gets a message from Asandir, where he's like, I send word of the Mistwraith Spain, which I think is a really, really nifty line. But and then you get to see what how Aerith and Lysae are supposed to, an idea of how they're supposed to deal with this. But overall, I thought that section was really kind of short, compared to the other. So it's like they may not all be the same length,
Yeah, and they don't always switch scenes either, right? Because the last chapter we stuck with the traveling band.
The Rolling Stones.
So I have a bit of a confusion in like page 58 of this volume. The Darker's prophecy, he says ocean world of Tassin Elor, however that's pronounced,
Yep.
left unwatched for 5 score years. Now, I think score is 20, so they
It
left it
is.
unwatched for the last 100 years. Like, what
Mhm.
does that mean? I'm trying to figure out what they did for 400 years. They watched it and then they ignored it for 100 years, and then that gave rise to the Mistwraith's Bane. Is that what happened? Um, yeah, I was confused about whether I was misreading score as 20 instead of century, or if that just meant that they were doing something. They were monitoring this ocean world for 400 years and then they gave up, and now they have their prophecy fulfilled.
So left unwatched. So yeah, nobody that ignored this place for 100 years, and then some shape from high kings and men, untried arts and unborn hands. So that's the two sons, I think. And then
Yeah.
they shall bring the end of the Mistwraith and free at
Mhm.
their son again.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it was one of the bits that often in books like this they kind of don't make sense until the very end of the book, but
Yeah.
actually within this context they started dealing with it quite quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it?
So it's just before
If
Prelude.
you have this copy, it's 58, the masked paperback, page 58.
It's just before the end of chapter 2. Like it's literally a couple of pages before the end of chapter 2.
Oh, okay.
As we go. Yeah.
I think I'm trying to find it.
Because the start of chapter 3 then gives you the Davian prophecy as well, then about the 500 years.
Yeah. It's 5 centuries earlier. So I
Yeah.
thought it might be a reference to that because they went there 5 centuries earlier. But then it's only 100 if you add up the 5 score. So yeah, I was curious about that, if there was an explanation yet. But I guess we'll find out later.
Mm-hmm.
Unless Chibipo can tell us something without spoiling.
I think there's a lot of questions asked, even about the Mistwraith itself. I mean, the Mistwraith is seen as a malevolent, bad thing, but often when these things happen, and there was a reason that people forgot why it had to happen, kind of thing. Which again is one of the things that I expect to kind of be explored or come out.
Yeah.
They might free the sun, yes, but
yeah, I think we're getting to some of that. I read about halfway of this book the last time I tried, so I think some of your questions might be answered.
Yeah, well, those are the things I expect to be answered and talked about, because they're the questions that I have as a reader.
That part gets a bit interesting from what I remember. I was gonna say,
and I suppose it must be interesting as a fantasy writer. This is one of the reasons I could never be a writer, right?
Yeah.
In my head, I'd be going, right, people who are going to read my book, especially one like this, it's many, many tomes and it's thick, will have probably read a lot of fantasy. So how do you write both to satisfy them, but also give them something like that? That bit would just torture me. I think I would just be like, no, I'm not even attempting. Narratively, how to do it, structurally, how to do it, anything like that would be impossible.
The other bit, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
The other bit that I find really fascinating, or can't really wrap my head around, is how do you know you need 11 books to write this, or 10 books, or whatever large number of books you need to tell your story, right? At what point? It sounds like Janny Wurts knew right from the beginning just how long this is going to be and how she's going to break it up. So just plotting and planning on that scale, it's just like
That's it's actually kind of interesting. Because there's been points just watching her as the process goes, where the series kind of ballooned, and I thought it was really interesting. It's like that it ends up with 10 hardcovers, 11 paperbacks, but 10 hardcovers. And how it ended up flowing, because originally it was more like the first book, Curse of the Mistwraith, and then the second book, Ships of Merior, which is split into 2 paperbacks. But as a hardcover, it's one book. And then the middle arc was, became, when I first heard about her, her plans for it, it was divided up into 3 books.
Hmm.
It was Fugitive Prince, Grand Conspiracy, and Stormed Fortress. But as she wrote, Grand Conspiracy, stuff happens, as her own words. One of the characters hijacked the plot, and it just expanded, and then expanded again. And she talks a little bit of here and there about the publishing stuff. So it went from these 3 books to 5, and then the second arc, or the fourth arc, was set up as far as I can tell always as 2 books, and then she condensed everything, brought everything to a close with the final book. So I like the 1 to 5 to 1, but I don't think it was originally intended. I mean, like all the events I think were still there, but I don't think it was originally at least from what she said, going to be this many books. All right, let's see. No, but on the thing you were asking about, 5 score is 100 years. And on the page in the Kindle, I'm in chapter 2, and it says it's page 56, right at the end. I don't know, the Kindle pages don't always add up, but it says 56 of 800, so I don't know if that's matches the paperbacks. I think it does.
Yeah, it's off by 2 pages, but yeah,
okay.
maybe it's a different paperback.
Yeah, it's also like the size of the screen. There's a whole bunch of stuff that.
Yeah.
But the section right there before, it's got the prophecy, and then it gets the prelude, and then that 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs there. Neither knew his words were overheard by a second mind, incomprehensibly distant.
Right.
And so that was the first time. Like he basically, like you said, they basically ignored it, and this is the first time, in 100 years that anyone's looked in to see what's going on.
Yeah.
And I might have actually ignored it longer than that.
Yeah, so that's probably at least 100, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So because the prophecy was made a while ago, but before that, but at least I believe so. I'd have to, 5061. So basically, they, left unwatched for 5 score years. Okay, but which 5 score years? So basically, they just sent them, and stopped paying attention until something flagged their notice.
Yeah, that makes sense. At some point, I guess they just stopped paying attention to the world that the princess, not the kings, right? The princess ran away into. Yeah. So, sorry, new topic. What did you all think about the, I guess, the action scene at the end with the sword and how powerful that might be?
Super sword.
Super sword.
By the power of Grayskull kind of moment, the He-Man moment. I love the description of the sword, actually, its legacy and its lineage. I thought that was really, really cool done, because it sort of floated the idea a couple of times previously before really expounding upon it and then bringing it to life, and kind of how many hands had it passed through, and actually that, oh my God, imagine this being at this one place, and then the fact that it was kind of left behind.
Yeah.
One of those, it's like, how long do you say, like 12,000 years or something, and you just have to stop and think about that. It's like you're holding something that old, and you just like, you can't really conceive of that. You're like,
yeah. And I like that Arathon tried to hand it off to Lysair, and Asandra's like, nope. Nice try.
But I think that speaks to, at this point of the story, it seems like Lysair and Arathon are sort of converging as in terms of appreciating each other and like a friendship
Yeah.
of some sort at this stage. Whereas obviously we're told that it obviously goes the other way
Yeah.
at a certain point in time, but they kind of see the similarities rather than the difference. Even in the fight in Mirth, where they combine the powers at a very kind of base level,
Yeah.
well, if I do this, you do that, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah. and I really like that Lyser, he gives in to his anger and more base instincts, I guess, sometimes, but mostly he's really good at like curbing that and saying, nope, I'm wrong, let's work together. And yeah, I think so far I don't like, yeah, I like both of them. Maybe Arathon a little bit more because we get more insight into his like deeper consciousness a bit more than Lyser, and maybe because he's also been hurt more, so we get to sympathize with him a lot more.
I especially liked when he was recovering from his from the drugs, and that they came in and were asking, "Is he ready for basically to be executed yet?" And they made he acted like he was still recovering, and he told I forget the character's name, but he tells him like, "Just tell them I'm fine. Let's get this over with." Kind of like let's be done with this. So that told me a lot about, kind of filled me in on where he is and kind of character he is.
Yeah, because the doctor's like, no, they won't, know until you're ready to go, and he's like, yeah, I'm not letting you, endanger yourself like that. Let's just do this.
Tell them I'm ready.
But yeah, on the Sahelis foresight, both of them have it, though it kind of, but it basically it's like anytime they're planning things, they can foresee the consequences of whatever that is they're going to do, and how it'll affect people and whatnot. So it lets them,
Yeah, that's a bit like, not really spoilers, I don't think. That's a bit like Dune, I think, getting trapped in your, like, when you know what's going to happen and sometimes it feels inevitable, or like, what decision do you take? Yeah, I'm curious how that will be handled here.
And then I'm jumping around, but also I like that the sword is like, you pull it out, and if you're wielding it for a just cause or in defense of someone else, it's it's like it's going to light up really pretty and blind people, but it doesn't really do anything that like kills them. It just it's like it's going to dazzle and disorient people, and in the case of this very angry mini dragon, it's going to make it lose its mind and bash itself into the wall.
Yeah. I think the horses, I read To Ride Hell's Chasm before sometime last year, and in that the horses play a very big role. But I think in general, after reading even just the half of the book here, when I read a fantasy book that does not in which characters don't bother to feed the horses or make sure they don't run them for 24 hours straight, I'm like, nope, you're doing it wrong. I want to read 2 whole pages about you taking care of the horses.
Or even like horse behavior, like you can just easily see it's like, no, there's blood and dead things laying around, and the horses are going to freak out.
Yeah, I really love the attention Janny Wurts pays to the horses. It is interesting. Yeah, I remember that they are also creatures that need to be fed and taken care of. Like, I really like that. So.
Yes, anything else you guys have in your notes, or?
I don't think so. Let me take a quick look.
There was one line that I really loved. Let me see if I can pull it up. That I highlighted. It's a small one, but it caught my attention. He tried desperately to think. Facts slipped his grasp like spilled beans. I love that. It's small, it's short, but I like that it's like right through his hands. They're just going everywhere.
Okay, I have so many. Overwhelmed by Disney's dizziness, he reached inward to restore his shattered self-command. There's just something about that again, as everything's
Yeah.
spinning around it, he could gather himself. It give you a good
Mhm.
insight into who he was as a person. And,
Yeah. I have one for when I think it's at some point in the desert. I forget exactly when. I think maybe when Arathon is sleeping. Lie Serpent, he retrieved his weapon, impelled by antagonism too powerful to deny. He straightened with a flick of his wrist and flung the blade back at his enemy. I love that single line description. I think it's just sometimes we I guess we just have no power over our feelings or what our feelings impel us to do, and I think this is I love this example of that.
Yeah. One of my other ones was the very start, actually. The boatswain drew his rigging knife. He braced the captive's hand, palm upwards against the stern seat, and lifted his blade to cut. That moment, the longboat rocked. Diane's sunlight caught and splintered in the depths of an emerald setting, and it was like that light with emeralds, and then you see the gemstone as well as the light, etc., in the sea. Oh, it's just anything that involves color like that.
Yeah.
There was this other part there. How did he describe, or how did she describe the water? See if I can find it.
I can't find it, but I also love the description of Arathon playing the Lyrand for the first time. Yeah.
Oh, that was one of my favorite things, especially when you know Janny's an artist. The bard was sitting around. I could spot another musician. That is so true. As somebody that is classically trained as well, and you watch, like even in a band setting or somebody playing bass guitar, you can spot the person that's classically trained within a 5-piece or otherwise of a band, and you kind of go, okay, there are certain signs, and the confidence that he had that he knew he could recognize it. That was something I kind of went, oh yeah, that's really nice.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
First sentence. I thought it said a different word here. The longboat cleaved waters stained blood red by sunset, far beyond sight of any shore.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Yeah,
stained the blood and red, and it's brilliant. Yeah.
I thought it said stained scarlet for some reason, so I was like, I gotta find this. Where's it at? I was looking for that. I'm like, oh no, here it is.
What a writing. Here's a question I have for you, Chibibo. As somebody, have you read all of Johnny's works, or
as in just Beyond Wars of Light and Shadow? Yes.
Yeah, Beyond Wars of Light and Shadow. Yeah. Where does this sit amongst her other works?
I say it's my absolute favorite. I do, since I can relate this, since you brought up a copy of Magician, I do love the Empire trilogy that she co-wrote with Feist as well. I love it enough. I even have the Grim Oak special edition that they've been working on, and she's going to do the next cover soon. So yay for those.
More book envy. Okay, good.
It's a really nice book. So I'm like, but I'm very sparing about my special editions like that because they're so expensive.
Yeah.
But I park it as my top amongst all her for her series. As for series, she's done this one, Empire, and the Cycle of Fire. So for series, it's Wars of Light, Shadow, Empire, Cycle of Fire. If I were going to do 1, 2, and 3.
Nice.
For her individuals, we've got Two Red Hell's Chasm, Sorcerer's Legacy, and Master of White Storm. Plus, she has a short story collection.
That Way Lies Camelot.
And then she has her other Wars of Light and Shadow short stories, novellas that are around. To Ride Hell's Chasm is probably my favorite individual book. for like a standalone. But if I were picking a single book that is my absolute favorite from hers, it would be something within Words of Light and Shadow.
Okay. I'm about to redo the Empire trilogy, and I'm a bit afraid because it's my favorite. Yeah, it's my favorite series of all time up to this point, but I haven't read it in about 15 years. So I'm like, I've read Magician lots of times, but I've never went back because it was kind of, some encapsulated as perfect in your head.
You don't want to mess with it.
I don't want to mess with it. Exactly. Yeah.
I coined this phrase somewhere. I might have done it here on page twoing, or in comments and somewhere, in one of the other videos. But like, people are like, "Is this epic fantasy? Is this high fantasy or whatnot?" And I'm kind of like, for Words of Light and Shadow, I'm like, I don't really think it fits, properly in either epic or high fantasy or dark fantasy. I'm like, I kind of think it's its own little category. And I don't know, this may sound a little pretentious, but I was just like, if I were going to call it, any sort of genre of fantasy, I would just make up one for it and basically call it transcendent fantasy, because I really think as you read the series that's what it does. It's like you read this and it uplifts your view of things, and you as you learn things, and just encourages you to look beyond just like, oh well, these guys are fighting and that guy has blonde hair and that guy has dark hair, and the blonde hair must be the one who's the good guy, and and look into why people do things and just how futile things like hate and absolutely are. So yeah, so I would call it, like I said, not to sound too pretentious, but transcendent. It's really its own thing, and that it's not. And again, I don't want to put any off because I'm like waxing eloquent about it, but it's that it hasn't gotten that kind of attention of some of the other people that they've thrown. The publishing industry throws all their money behind, and it's like everybody's like, is this like Sanderson? Is this like Erickson? I'm like, no, it's better.
Yeah.
It reads most like Cobb to me, like the kind of Rob's a bit more purple prose, I suppose, than this in a lot of ways, but same kind of divisive kind of, either you absolutely adore it and revel it and want to sort of swim in it, or you're like, it's too wordy.
Yeah, I haven't read Hob yet. That's on my list for afterwards.
I have all the Hobbs, but I'll be honest, I've only read the first 3.
Okay.
But I mean to pick them up because I saw the paperbacks, the UK releases. And they had these absolutely beautiful covers, and I'm like, I gotta have these covers. And so I've got them all here to do. But I was just like, I looked at the American covers, and I'm like, ew.
Oh yeah, I do not like the American covers at all. Yeah.
But like I legitimately, like, everybody's like, Tolkien is the greatest thing ever, and I'm like, I appreciate Tolkien, and I appreciate what the his works did for the genre, but I also feel like the genre at some points people are just like, no, nothing can be better than Tolkien. I'm like, no, that's not true. That hasn't been true for a while. And if you really get into this one, I think they're like, this is up there with the amount of depth and detail and use of language and everything that easily would be right up there. I'd be like, her name should be mentioned right alongside.
Oh. I think we're up to a pretty good start.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So the first 5 chapters down, and next week we'll be talking chapters 6 through 10.
Yep.
And that's about 20 pages less in my edition. So probably be about 50 pages less for you guys in your mass markets. Yeah.
There's about 200 pages for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I honestly don't know what happened there, because the first 5 were up to page 177, Now we're going from 177 to 377.
Yeah, it's 200 pages.
Really?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because it's 200. Unless I miss.
The formatting of this can be a bit funny because of the split,
Yeah.
the breaking into three. So I find the whole way through, what I would say the first chunk takes a lot of time. You're reading it quite slowly, but actually because the next two sections or otherwise they kind of disappear almost. Those last 20 chapters go. There are a lot of half pages and that kind of stuff. So
Strange. It's weird.
Yeah, must be the formatting then.
Yeah, because they did the format and everything from the hardcover to those or the reissue was kind of odd because it was like the hardcover is like 688 pages, I think.
Yeah, I think you've the same same version as us, Robin. I think. Yeah.
The hardcover is 585.
585.
Yeah, this is 800 pages.
You're just showing that off again. Look, is that like brand newish as well? Is it like?
It's signed too.
And I think.
Stop it.
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh, I have to say, like special editions can see anything this author signed is just like, especially with your name and all on it, Steve.
Yeah.
Like I don't know.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so cool.
That's the kind of thing you take off somebody in a bad divorce and really hurts them.
You're gonna jinx me, Chris.
Sorry.
You can't have the books. Yeah.
It's like, no, you can't have these. I'm keeping these.
Those are mine.
I don't know. I don't know if I want to say this because it'll sound like I'm tooting my own horn and being like lording it over everyone. But like I said, I do have signed copies myself because a couple of years at Dragon Con I ambushed her with with a whole stack of books.
That's what those conventions are for, though. Really.
Also had lunch with her a year or two, which was pretty neat.
That's so cool.
But my absolute favorite of all the books, not necessarily for the book itself, as I really like the book, but is Trader's Knot, which is like the second to last book in the third arc. But one night back in like 2003 or so, she posted on her website asking a question that she couldn't remember a detail for, as she was writing, and I happened to be online and answered the question for her, and then she messaged me and she's like, can you send me an email? And I was like, okay. And then she's like, do you have any objections if I include your name in the acknowledgements?
Wow.
So I have an autographed copy with my name in the acknowledgements. So
wow.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Live in infamy forever.
Yeah. So it's like, I am in the Library of Congress.
That's
just
cool.
like every book's supposed to be there. It's like you could find me in the Library of Congress.
That's cool.
And always worth checking Twitter and things at all times. That's.
So we'll be doing 6 through 10 next week. If you'd like to join either in the chat or on stream, all those details are on our forums at pagetoing.com. But before we go, Chibipo, can you tell us where to find you if you want to be found?
Sure. I am on. I hang around Page Chewing. I don't talk nearly as much as I should, but I also have a Twitter. I don't really talk much on there, except about book stuff. But it's Chibipo1 because someone had already apparently used Chibipo when I, tried to sign up, and they'd gotten whoever that was had gotten themselves suspended. So that without a 1 was not available, which is annoying. But
yeah, it doesn't
gives you a cool story though.
Yeah, I was like, which I thought was weird. I'm like, because at first I was like, did I try to sign up and get suspended from Twitter at some point? I'm like, no, because I'm pretty sure I didn't ever touch Twitter, because I was like, social media, and so I was like, okay, whatever, I'll just put a 1 in front of it, and
That's cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
It's nice that you can do one, though. I have to put like 1,000 or 5,000. If I do first name and last name, I still have to add a lot of numbers.
Yeah,
That's very
that's
creative.
why. That was the other reason. I was like, why is there a chibi po? It's like it's so specific combination that I'm like, I didn't understand why someone else would have used it, but
You never know.
Oh, dear. Indeed.
And Chris, where can
I also
people
have
find
YouTube,
you?
but there's
Oh,
nothing there. So
Yes, you can find me on my YouTube channel, just at my name. You can find me on Twitter at 7 o'clock shadow or on the Page Tune forums.
cool. And Varsha?
The YouTube channel Reading by the Rainy Mountain and the About page for other ways to contact me.
Nice. So thanks to all of you for coming by. Thanks for everyone in the chat. Robin and Layla and Paramita, thanks for hanging out with us. And we will see everyone next Sunday.
Yep.
Or whenever you're watching this. You're not going to watch this on Sunday. But those of us here, we're time travel. But yeah, we'll see everybody next week.
See you then.
bye.
Bye.